think the welcome is first. So that's why I'm up here. Good morning. On behalf of the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Columbus, I would like to welcome you to our Sunday service. I'm Amber Scott, and I serve as your Director of Religious Exploration. Let's begin our time together by acknowledging the land which holds us, home of the Adena, the Hopewell, the Wyandotte, the Miami, the Seneca, and the Cayuga. Gathered here and online, may we be grateful, thoughtful, and humble. This morning, we continue our exploration of our monthly theme, Holding History. Today's sermon was written by Reverend Joan Van Biesler. Unfortunately, Joan could not be with us today, so we've got some people filling in, but the sermon you'll hear later is her words. I invite you to use your imagination as we rise in body or spirit and join our chalice choir in singing our opening song, Turn Back, which is number 120 in the gray hymnal, if you're following along. If you're at home, feel free to belt it out. If you're here in the worship center, consider humming or singing softly so that you're sharing your love but not your breath.
Again, good morning. I'm Reverend Linda Smith, and I'm your pastoral care minister who is substituting for Reverend Joan today. And she wrote the sermon that I'm going to be sharing with you. Whether this is your first, second, or third, or 50th or 500th time here, welcome. If you consider yourself a visitor and you are here in the building, I invite you to say hello at the Welcome Center out in the Welcome Hall after the service. We have a visitor's gift for you there. Anyone joining us in the virtual world, I invite you to let us know that you are here by clicking the link in the chat and filling out the check-in form. Don't forget that you can access our order of service, Joys and Sorrows form, and our donation page by scanning the QR code on the screen. If you have any questions about this at all, please don't hesitate to ask. We have 2 ushers in the room who can help answer any questions, and a welcome team in the Welcome Center that can also answer any questions after the service. Let us center ourselves as we begin our service. Thank you, Nathan. If you're joining us online, I invite you to bring your chalice close to you so that we can light our chalices together. Adam Murchowski will help us light the chalice this morning. Our chalice lighting words this morning are from Paul Becker. We light this chalice to honor the memory of those who have come before us, kindling flames of wisdom in dark times, willing to challenge orthodoxy even at great personal risk, giving us a legacy of freedom and a love of truth, a legacy that warms our hearts and lights our paths. Thank you, Adam. Our chalice is lit.
Good morning, again. I'm happy to see you here today on this somewhat gray day. Activities for families with children are happening during the worship service today outside on the SYC playground. After the story, you'll have the opportunity to join our other families outdoors if you are interested. I'd also like to bring your attention to the table that's set up today in Beach Hall. Some of the youth from our local 4-H group are doing a fundraiser that is raising money for local foster children, so I invite you to please check that out. Our youth group is also doing a field trip this afternoon to the Ohio History Center to learn about local indigenous peoples. Today's story is called The Right Way School. Written by Shabnam Minwala and illustrated by Fahad Fazal, published on Storyweaver. The Right Way School was a brown building in a gray compound. Sometimes the gray compound was filled with straight rows of students in dark blue uniforms. The Right Way School believed that there was a right way to study, a right way to dress, a right way to stand in rows. This is what it taught its students. More than anybody in the school, Mrs. Gambier believed in doing things the right way. Mrs. Gambier was the class teacher of room 3. In Hindi, Gambier means serious. It was the perfect name for her. Every day, Mrs. Gambier would write with white chalk on the blackboard. One Thursday afternoon, she wrote, "The root of a plant is buried under the soil and takes in water and nutrients. Now, copy and learn," she said. "But Miss," Rohit asked, "what are nutrients?" Mrs. Gambier ignored him. Questions and interruptions were not the right way. Mrs. Gambier asked, "Mira, what is the root of a plant?" Mira's hands turned cold. Her mind went blank. Mrs. Gambier said, "Tisk, tisk." Mira began to cry. Mrs. Gambier asked Rohit, "What is a root?" The part under mud and it takes water and..." Mrs. Gambier said, "Tisk, tisk, tisk," and took away his chocolate biscuits. When Mrs. Gambier was angry, she said, "Tisk, tisk." When she was furious, she snarled, "Tisk, tisk, tisk." Everybody wondered what would happen the day she said, "Tisk, tisk, tisk, tisk." In history, Mrs. Gambier made the class learn dates. In art, she made her students draw a blue river, green mountains, and yellow sun. If anybody added an apple tree or a cottage, Mrs. Gambier said, "Tisk, tisk, tisk," and tore the paper. Naturally, room 3 tried to do things the right way until one Monday morning when the door of the classroom opened and a stranger walked in. The stranger who walked in was a tiny girl. She had huge eyes and hair like a palm tree on a windy day. She was wearing a red dress with frilly sleeves. She did not look neat or worried. She did not look as if she belonged to the Right Way School. She looked happy. "Yes?" Mrs. Gambier asked in a forbidding voice. "I'm the new girl, Layla," the tiny stranger replied in a voice as noisy and merry as the horn of a bus. The students of room 3 blinked. Mira and Rohit smiled. Mrs. Gambier didn't smile. She frowned. "Welcome to room 3, Layla," she finally said. "In this school, students do things the right way. They talk softly. They wear school uniforms. They keep their hair neat. And they obey their teacher." At lunchtime, the students of room 3 surrounded Layla. Rohit asked questions. Lavanya gave advice, and Mira held Layla's hand. "Be careful," she whispered to her new best friend. "Mrs. Gambier is scary when she's angry." Layla tried not to make Mrs. Gambier angry. Every day, she wore her new blue uniform and tied her hair with 8 clips and 4 rubber bands. Every day, Mira reminded her to be careful. But still, Layla forgot. She couldn't help herself. She drew a cat like everybody else, except her cat was pink and licking a lollipop. Mrs. Gambier hissed, "Tisk, tisk," and tore the drawing. Layla colored the map of India like everybody else, but then she filled it with elephants and boats and mango trees. Mrs. Gambier spat, "Tisk, tisk, tisk," and made Layla spend her lunch break in the classroom. However much Layla tried to be invisible, her questions popped out. How can a big tree fit in a small seed? Why don't fish make sounds? Why don't islands float away? Mrs. Gambier minded. She minded even more when Rohit started to ask questions, and Lavanya, and Ahmad. "The next student to interrupt my class will spend the whole month in the corridor," she shouted. On Monday morning, Mrs. Gambier taught her class about weather. The class was behaving in the right way. So the question that tumbled into Layla's head and out of her mouth seemed loud. "Miss, are clouds like air or cotton wool?" Tisk, tisk, tisk. "Tisk!" Mrs. Gambier exploded. Then she pointed at the door. Looking sad and small, Layla stumbled out of the classroom. Looking pleased, Mrs. Gambier wrote on the blackboard, "Rainfall is water falling in drops from vapor." But a voice interrupted the teacher, a voice usually too scared to speak in class. "Miss," Mira whispered bravely, "does a cloud feel like cotton wool?" The class gaped. Mrs. Gambier shook as she pointed to the door. Mira walked out of the classroom. Then Rohit raised his hand. Then Lavanya. 5 minutes later, Mrs. Gambier was teaching an empty classroom about rainfall. Well, not exactly empty. The desks and chairs were there, but they didn't interrupt the teacher, and she was happy. 20 minutes later, the principal of the Right Way School walked past room 3 and gaped. In the Right Way School, students did not stand in corridors in noisy groups. They sat in classrooms in silent lines. The principal opened her mouth to shout. Then she closed it. Instead, she opened her ears to listen. Layla and Ahmad and Mira and Lavanya and many others were talking about clouds. "They look like cotton wool. How can rain come out of them? How do they stay up in the sky? Why don't they fall down?" The principal cleared her throat. Then she clapped twice for silence. "Let me answer your questions," she said. That was the day the Right Way School changed the first of its many rules. It decided that asking questions was the right way, all thanks to a little girl with wild hair, a bus horn voice, and endless curiosity. The end. In this story, Layla's inquisitive nature causes her whole school to question the rules they had always taken for granted. A culture shift was made possible because she insisted on doing things in a new and different way. Today, as we learn more about the radical ideas of the Pilgrims and the Puritans, I invite you to think about moments when there is good reason to defy authority. Families who would like to participate in outdoor Sunday school are now invited to head towards the playground during this musical interlude.
Thank you, Nathan. To participate in the caring meditation this morning, or to ask for pastoral or spiritual support in a difficult time of your life, now is the time to fill out the Joys and Sorrows form. You can find it by scanning the QR code on your screen or here on the slide, or by visiting firstuu.org/Sunday. If we receive your joy or sorrow in the next few minutes, we'll read it aloud during the caring meditation. This form is also available during the week. We also have several pastoral listeners here this morning. You can spot them by the purple scarf they're wearing, and they'll join me later for our caring meditation. Kathleen, for the caring meditation. They're available to chat after the service if there's anything you need heard or witnessed. Other members of our pastoral team are available throughout the week. Let us remain seated as we listen to the Chalice Choir in singing one verse of Voice Still and Small, and you may join in with them. That's number 391 in the gray hymnal. The words will be on the screen. Our centering words are, "Let us be a people of not forgetting," written by Karen G. Johnston. Permission from Soul Matters. As we gather this morning, let us be a people of not forgetting. Let us practice holding collective memories that might otherwise slip into that enormous void that sucks at and corrodes any future we hold dear. Let us practice honoring truth-telling up from the past that must come fully into the now, lest we falter and fail, lest the whole remains in pieces. Let not our need for comfort or simplicity, for easy forgiveness or false pardon, smother the heartbreak that still needs healing. Let us practice resilience with reckoning. Let us marry memory and promise. Let us dance in the tension we find there. Let us rest in the integrity we cultivate there. Let us be partners with the possibility that emerges there. It is good we gather together. Now we will hear the song Union, written by the early American composer William Billings and sung by Dr. Brandon Moss and Nathan Ham.
Behold, how good and joyful a thing it is for brothers to dwell together in unity and peace. Behold, how good and joyful a thing it is for sisters to dwell together in unity and peace.
It is like the precious ointment upon the head.
It is like the precious ointment upon the head that ran down, that ran down, that ran down unto the beard of Aaron,
And went down to the
and
skirts
went
of
down to the skirts of his clothing, down to the skirts of his clothing.
And went down to the
And
skirts of his
went down to the skirts of his clothing, down to the skirts of his clothing. Like as the dew of Hermon which fell upon the hill of Zion, like as the dew of Hermon which fell upon the hill of Zion, like as the dew of Hermon which fell upon the hill of Zion, like as the dew of Hermon which fell upon the dew of Zion. For there the Lord promised his blessing, his blessing, his blessing and life forevermore. Amen. And life, and life forevermore. Amen. And life forevermore. Amen. For there the Lord promised his blessing, his blessing, his blessing and life forevermore. Amen. And life, and life forevermore. Amen. And life forevermore. Amen.
Our reading this morning is from a blog by the author and organizational expert, Margaret Wheatley. America needs to learn this undeniable truth of human existence. No matter what's going on around us, if we truly believe that we're in this together and we work hard to be there for one another, we can make it through. Yet there's a long journey ahead. And to make it through, we must give up our love of self and individualism and truly embrace community. And here are a few questions about the behaviors that need to change. Can we get over ourselves? Can we stop focusing on our private needs and open to the greater good, to what may benefit all? Can we realize that in this intertwined world, if the least of us benefit, we all benefit. If they suffer, we suffer. Can we let go of our need to blame, to judge, to scapegoat, all the thoughtless and hasty ways we separate from each other? Can we shift away from self-interest and self-protection and do this everywhere, at home, at work, in public meetings? Can we give up fear and exchange it for generosity? This is the experiment going on in America. Nobody knows the outcome, but we need to make a choice, each of us, and it's our choices that will determine the outcome. Will we choose to engage wholeheartedly with one another, working together to create healthier communities, persevering through the difficulties and frustrations of working together? Or will we withdraw and hunker down in self-protection? I hope that we have a choice to make every day. We can choose to be in this together or not.
Thank you, Nathan. Well, this is the easiest sermon I've ever written. I'm just speaking the words of Reverend Joan. I wish she could have been with us today, but she'll be fine. Learning from our ancestors is part of the spiritual work of Sankofa. Sankofa translates from the language of Ghana as reach back and get it, or to look into the past to inform the future. There's a proverb in Ghana which says, "It is not wrong to go back for that which you have forgotten." A common image for this concept in Ghana is a bird that is moving forward and looking back. It's a reminder that the past must not be forgotten. Instead, we should learn from it and use it to inform our positive actions in the future. Thanksgiving was last week. We know the first Thanksgiving was not that Victorian-era romanticized gathering we heard about in grade school, but there was a harvest celebration in the fall of 1621 that did involve our Pilgrim ancestors and the indigenous Wampanoag peoples of Massachusetts. We remember the Wampanoag people who generously helped the early colonists who landed on their shores some 400 years ago, only to be expelled and murdered later by the same colonists they had helped. We acknowledge that many indigenous communities do not reflect on the Thanksgiving holiday with gratitude, but a day of mourning and loss. These truths are all lessons of Sankofa. What we have inherited from the Pilgrims, as well as the Puritans, both the good and the tragic, is part of who we are as Unitarian Universalists. This morning, let's do some Sankofa work and reach back for the sake of our future. In 1608, a small group of English religious reformers who wanted to separate themselves entirely from the Church of England moved to Holland after being denied the freedom to practice their beliefs in England. A group of 102 of these separatists, the Pilgrims, later sailed to Plymouth, Massachusetts in 1620 when they found that Holland was not as friendly as they thought it would be. These separatist pilgrims, contrary to the established Church of England, believed that the members of each congregation should have the right to choose their own leaders, own their own church property, and ordained their own clergy. Membership in a congregation was voluntary and not determined by where you were born in a parish. Believers should be united with God and other believers by a covenant alone that is entered into willingly by individual choice. And they believed that because God could speak to each person individually and equally, people should tolerate differences of opinions in the church, because the Spirit might be speaking to one person more clearly than others. This bit of theology has evolved through the years to inform our own Unitarian Universalist commitment to inclusion and tolerance. The English Puritans, on the other hand, chose to remain part of the Church of England and work from within to purify the church of false ritual and unbiblical practices. A large group of Puritan colonists sailed for New England in 1629 and 1630, establishing their colony at Massachusetts Bay and Boston. The Pilgrims, as part of their passionate commitment to reform, immediately and without compromise, strongly emphasized the individual duty to God. The Puritans, deeply committed to covenant theology, strongly emphasized the community, the corporate duties of the community to God and to each other. The Boston Puritans and the Plymouth Separatist Pilgrim colonies were entirely different politically, socially, and even theologically. And they were not in conversation with each other when they sailed to Massachusetts. A single ship, the Mayflower, carrying 102 pilgrims, arrived in Plymouth in December of 1620. Their first building quickly became a hospital, as half of the colonists died that winter from disease and starvation. Their first cemetery was on a bluff above the beach of Plymouth Rock, and the graves were allowed to be overgrown with grass out of fear that the indigenous peoples would discover how weak the settlement had actually become. The Pilgrims did have a doctor to help them survive, Samuel Fuller. He was a deacon who picked up some medical training in Holland and owned a copy of the best medical handbook of the time. In the spring of 1621, with the help of the Wampanoag people, the Pilgrims learned to fish and farm and survive. At the harvest celebration in the fall of 1621, there were about 50 colonists left to attend. 22 men, 4 women, and 25 children and teens. 78% of the women and most of the men had died in the winter. And they were outnumbered at the celebration by the Wampanoag, who brought 90 men to what became a 3-day festival. In contrast, when the Puritans arrived in Massachusetts Bay in 1629 and 30, they came in 17 ships carrying more than 1,000 passengers. They came with money, resources, armed soldiers, and a kind of divinely ordained arrogance. But they did not bring a doctor. Go figure. But they too got sick and then asked the Pilgrims in Plymouth for medical help and even some advice on church organization. Plymouth immediately responded and sent Samuel Fuller to serve as doctor for the Puritans, and the two colonies started to work together for their mutual survival. They eventually merged, and the theologies of Puritan community, covenant, and Pilgrim independent church governance soon became part of the common life in New England. While back in England, Oliver Cromwell's Puritan party had taken over Parliament and removed the king from power. Parliament then demanded reform in the Church of England, removed the bishops, and replaced them with the Presbyterian-style system of ruling elders who made all decisions for the local churches. In 1646, the Puritan Parliament created the Westminster Confession and required that all churches adopt the Confession's Reformed theology and the Presbyterian style of church organization. Then Parliament demanded that these new rules also be followed by the New England colonial churches. But by this time, the colonial churches had become increasingly committed and radical about their independent way of life. And so it was in September 1646, the General Council of Massachusetts summoned all colonial clergy to a conference in Cambridge. Some individual churches were so independent-minded by this time that the official summons had to be quickly reworded to an invitation before some of the ministers would agree to attend. The big issue was, who could control church life in the colonies? The Parliament in England or the colonists themselves? A committee of clergy was assigned the task of writing a reply to Parliament to argue for an independent New England congregational structure. This document, finished in 1648, came to be called the Cambridge Platform. It was bad enough that Parliament wanted to control the way churches governed themselves, but Parliament was also threatening heavier control of all aspects of life in the colonies. You can see where our rebel streak came from. But these New England clergy were very smart and very diplomatic. Instead of telling Parliament where to go and what to do with their hated type of official control, the New England clergy started their reply by agreeing with the theology of the Westminster Confession. They said the theology was holy, orthodox, and judicious in all manners of faith. But then they went on to say, only in those things which have respect to church governance and discipline, we refer ourselves to the platform of church discipline agreed upon by this present assembly. In other words, dear Parliament, your theology is fine and dandy, and we agree to it, but we will stick to our own way of running our congregations and our colonies. Thank you very much, and back off. These New England clergy could easily have been charged with treason by the Parliament, and the clergy knew it. They risked their lives, their families, and the future of the colonies to maintain their own understanding of church, its organization, and the rights of the member. It mattered that much to them. The Cambridge Platform not only argued for congregational autonomy and the rights of the local church, it also articulated a covenant of interdependence, outlining the mutual support that all the New England churches owed one another. The platform named 6 core duties that each church owed to the others as part of this covenant. Number 1, mutual care. To consider the common good of all when making decisions. Number 2, consultation. To ask for counsel and advice from other congregations, as well as to give counsel and advice. Number 3, admonition. To hold each other accountable and call out congregations who were acting outside of the covenant. 4, common participation. Members of one church are always welcomed in others, and clergy are shared by one church with another when needed. 5, member recommendation. When a member in good standing in one church moves to another church, they are admitted as a member of the new church. And lastly, relief, to provide financial support to one another. This covenant went way beyond simple sharing with one another. Simple sharing does not require us to learn from others. It does not move us to shift our perspectives or adapt to new situations. Simple sharing does not challenge us with accountability, or teach us to live in relationships of real interdependence. These congregations knew they were in a precarious and very uncertain position. They had to rely on each other for survival, even though they had not learned to articulate our seventh principle. Our ancestors knew they had to live as if the interdependent web of existence mattered, because it did. Sharing, of course, is good. We learned that as children, but our religious ancestors teach us that simple sharing is not enough if we are to survive and thrive in quickly evolving times of change and uncertainty. And we can reach back and learn that lesson for our future. Back to the story. The English Parliament was not at all thrilled by the reply from the New England colonies, and Parliament made plans to send an army to put them back under their control. But then the Parliament faced a larger problem with uprisings that turned into the Second English Civil War, and they needed the army elsewhere. So the New England churches were left alone to grow and evolve in their Congregationalist ways. From these New England Congregationalists, Unitarianism evolved in the early 1800s. We Unitarian Universalists have inherited the congregational governments and the covenantal theology found in the Cambridge Platform. Throughout our history, there have been times when we have honored and upheld the platform, including that covenant of mutuality. And there have been times when we have, frankly, forgotten it existed. Not all that long ago, we might publicly say that we were part of a larger religious movement, but in practice, our congregations were very often isolationists, shut off from one another and the larger UU movement. This old isolationist attitude rose from a truncated view of congregationalism that thought the autonomy of local church was the only thing that really mattered. We tended to forget the covenant part. And I believe we are starting to remember our roots again. We are beginning to see the value of intercongregational collaboration and covenant, and we are beginning to do the spiritual work of Sankofa. Now is the time when we are called to reach back and get it from our New England ancestors for the sake of our post-pandemic future. If we take their story to heart, we can embrace a new commitment to covenant and what it means to be a Unitarian Universalist congregation in changing times. The lesson of our ancestors calls us to move beyond simple sharing into building a new architecture of interdependence and create vibrant networks of collaborative partnerships. In collaboration, we enrich ourselves as well as others and strengthen the role of liberal religion in society as we move beyond the walls of our own individual congregations. We are called to work together, learn together, worship together, adapt and change together, if we want to build the beloved community we dream about. Like Margaret Wheatley noted, there is a new experiment emerging in our world. She asks if we will choose to engage wholeheartedly with one another, working together to create healthier communities, persevering through the difficulties and frustrations of working together? Or will we withdraw and hunker down in isolated self-protection? We speak of Unitarian Universalism as a living tradition, rooted in history, but responding to the needs of the present time. When we reach back to our roots, we see a rich, interdependent model of how congregations and all of us as members can and should be in relationship with each other. The philosopher Dana Zohar said, "Everything is created out of relatedness, sustained through relationships, and thrives in interdependence." As we recover from this pandemic, we will be asked to choose between old, familiar, and isolated ways of being, or choose the exciting opportunity to live into a wide open future where we truly become better together, working interdependently to change the world. We have a choice to make. We can choose to be in this together or not. What will we choose?
Thank you, Reverend Linda. And Joan. Our church is a community of love, caring, and generosity. Together we work for a more just world. To offer our gifts and pay our promised pledges is to say yes, we are defined by our hearts and our deeper values. Our Share the Plate recipient for November is a Sedona Grace Foundation. Sedona Grace is a public charity that provides dog food, cat food, treats, aka canine care packages, to families in need throughout Central Ohio food pantries. Through community support, Sedona Grace has provided thousands of pounds of food to pet owners who want to feed and keep their pets, but who are also struggling to meet their own food needs. Our donations have a bigger impact when we give together. Regardless of your ability to contribute, we value your presence here. Thank you. I now invite forward Bob Mills, our pastoral listener, to help lead the caring meditation today. And Sharon Hammersley. Our caring meditation words are from the Reverend Dr. Howard Thurman this morning. As we read this, please think about the interconnected web of existence and the threads of that web that you hold in your hands. This is entitled The Threads in My Hand, a meditation by Howard Thurman. Only one end of the threads I hold in my hand. The threads go many ways, linking my life with other lives. One thread comes from a life that is sick, it is taut with anguish. There is always there is the lurking fear that the life will snap. I hold it tenderly, I must not let it go. One thread comes from a high-flying kite. It quivers with the mighty current of fierce and holy dreaming, invading the common day with far-off places and visions bright. One thread comes from the failing hands of an old, old friend. Hardly aware am I of the moment when that tight line slackened and there was nothing at all, nothing. One thread is but a tangled mass that won't come right. Mistakes, false starts, lost battles, angry words, a tangled mass. I have tried so hard, but it won't come right. One thread is a strange thread. It is my steadying thread. When I am lost, I pull it hard and find my way. When I am saddened, I tighten my grip and gladness slides along its quivering path. When the waste spaces of my spirit appear in arid confusion, the thread becomes a channel of newness of life. One thread is a strange thread. It is my steadying thread. God's hand holds the other. And here are our caring cards and joys and sorrows this morning.
So there's one joy and one sorrow this morning. The joy is the celebration of a belated celebration of the birthday of Karen Jones, who turned 80 about 2 weeks ago. So if you're in touch with Karen in the next while, give her congratulations on her birthday. It's not belated for her, it's belated for us. The sorrow is what we've heard about this morning, that Joan von Biesler was injured and so can't be with us this morning. And so we wish her our healing thoughts. And so if you're in touch with Joan, give her your healing concerns. That's our joys and sorrows this morning.
Thank you both. May we hold these joys and sorrows and those yet unspoken gently in our hearts, and when the time comes, let them flow along. As Linda rings our temple bell, I invite you into a brief time of silence. Use this time to reflect, imagine, pray, or just simply be. The temple bell will ring a second time as we continue our service.
I offer closing words adapted from Adrian Rich and Reverend Wayne Arneson. The way is often hard and the path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Cast your lot with those who age after age, perversely with no extraordinary power, reconstitute the world. Take courage and carry forth the light. For deep down there is another truth. You are not alone. We close this morning with hymn number 212 in the gray hymnal. We are dancing Sarah's Circle. You may sing the refrain, sisters, brothers, all as is, or choose a more inclusive language with siblings, cousins, all. Let us sing. If you've joined us online, I invite you to bring your chalice close so we can extinguish the flame together. After our service has completed, please join us for our informal coffee hour. If you are online, please use the Zoom link this morning to join the online coffee hour. This week's online coffee hour is hosted by our Rainbow Connection. In person or online, all are welcome to join the conversation. Now let us join together in saying our chalice extinguishing words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of vision. As we go forth, let us heal and transform ourselves and our world through reason and love. Our chalice is extinguished. Please remain in your seats as the choir sings our benediction and Nathan plays our post.